Rob on the mic, spitting truth from the heights. Queens unite under stadium lights. Bright nights, 7 train rides. Dreams born in the real hum. Brooklyn to Queens, yeah, we all about that outcome. This our time, this our cheer. Mets talk loud, bring the hype, make it clear. From the boroughs to the field, this our year. Queens in the house, let the world hear. From Flushing Meadows, echoes bounce off the bat. Rob calls, take the mic, snaps like a thunderclap. Home runs over bridges, no gaps in the story. Mets rise, reclaiming the glory. 7 the city, blue and orange army swarm. Summer vibe electric, love in every form. From Biggie's blocks to Flushing's heartbeat. Our anthem loud, no retreat. This our time, this our cheer. Mets talk loud, bring the hype, make it clear. From the boroughs to the field, this our year. Queens in the house, let the world hear. The apple pops in the outfield, city of dreams. Rob's voice over static, Mets on every stream. White lines mapped out the future, vividly. From shade to city, the journey's never gimmicky.
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome to a special edition of Mets Talk Live. Kyle Tucker Watch right here on the channel and on X. And guys, we are getting to the final countdown for Kyle Tucker. We hear about the long-term deal from the Toronto Blue Jays. We know the Dodgers have a short-term deal on the table for Kyle Tucker. And we know a lot of details about the Mets offer to Kyle Tucker. We're going to break that all down. We're going to see what is legit, what is not, what is the issues, why are all these leaks happening with the New York Mets when they never leak anything. We're going to get into all of that, so make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and every single day that Kyle Tucker is not signed, we will have a Kyle Tucker Watch show on the channel. So might just be me, Chris, somebody else, just to get everybody else's perspective as well. But to talk about everything, before we can get into the details of possible contracts, teams involved, and all that other stuff, and who's the more aggressive team, the team that might be lurking in the background. First things first. With the market developing with Kyle Tucker, and there wasn't a lot of, I would say, heat on Kyle Tucker when it comes to a lot of teams wanting or willing to give a long-term deal, that pushed the Mets into that category with Kyle Tucker when we thought that Kyle Tucker was a pipe dream. But remember this, we always knew that it was going to be a short-term deal no matter what it was when it came to Kyle Tucker. The same thing when it came to the possibility of Tucker being a possibility that the Mets could actually be involved seriously, people still didn't take it seriously. Why don't they take it seriously? Because we have David Stearns at the realm. Now, we all know John from To Mets Do Us Part, right? We had a little back and forth, again, respectfully, back and forth when it came to David Stearns and, with the Tucker situation and now Cohen being involved. I said it straight out. I posted it on X. If you follow me on X, you've probably seen it. But if you didn't, I'll tell you right here. I basically said that funny how David Stearns is going to get all the credit, because this is what's going to happen. Met fans are going to call, David Stearns a genius. He's smarter than everybody else. They're gonna wave the pom-poms for David Stearns. But I also says, yeah, they're gonna give him all the credit, but we know now Steve Cohen is in the negotiations now, right? He wasn't in the negotiations with Edwin Diaz. David Stearns fucked that up. We know Pete Alonso last year, David Stearns, yeah, he might have waited out the market, but any idiot could have realized there was no market for Pete Alonso. So David Stearns didn't do any ingenuity or shocking that we didn't all know. We know Pete Alonso didn't have a market last year. So David Stearns didn't do anything special. And at the end of the day, Steve Cohen got involved in that negotiations to get the deal done, not David Stearns alone. Now, obviously, Steve Cohen signs off on anything, but let's be honest. When Steve Cohen gets involved, Steve Cohen takes over the negotiations. David Stearns is there as, taking notes. He's gonna put the final touches on the contracts. He's gonna make sure all the details are settled. Right? That's one thing. Then the next thing is this. Juan Soto. Does anybody believe that David Stearns had a lot to do with that? Yeah, of course he's going to be in the room. But we all know who negotiated that contract. You think David Stearns offered him a suite? No. You think David Stearns offered him more money than anybody else? No. Let's not act like, you know what David Stearns did? He brought in Frankie Montas. He re-signed Sean Manaea. Right? He did all that. Right? You know the disaster of last year? A lot of that had to do with David Stearns. The lack of trade deadline moves is because of David Stearns. Now, again, does David Stearns deserve a little bit of credit when it comes to how this market developed? Because the market didn't develop because David Stearns doesn't dictate the market. He never dictates the market. Other teams dictate the market that allows David Stearns to, be in the room. Now that Steve Cohen is in the negotiations now and probably heading the negotiations, why do you think you hear about a fourth year? You really think David Stearns is a guy that's going to add a fourth year? Nah, that's all Steve Cohen. We all know that. And when me and John were going back and forth, and again, John does great work. Till Messer's part, him and Ibby, they do great work, right? Love the guy. Love those guys. But respectfully, if you're not paying attention to the situation and what has been happening on and on again, every time things are happening and it's not moving quick enough, or, there's a possibility of losing a guy that the Mets are very interested in, Steve Cohen has to step in. If that keeps on happening, why is David Stearns here in the first place? He's supposed to do that job. Why do you keep on failing with every big name that is linked to the New York Mets? Why does Steve Cohen have to be involved? That dude should be on his yacht. He shouldn't be worrying about coming into negotiations and heading the negotiation because David Stearns can't finish the job. That's the problem. So, and again, I don't care. And I told John this as well. I told Hector this as well on social media when we were going back and forth. I said, I don't care how we get Kyle Tucker. At the end of the day, we get Kyle Tucker. I don't care how it happened. But let's not act like David Stearns did all this by himself when he had nothing to do with this. The teams around the league dictated Kyle Tucker's market, not the New York Mets, because we heard nothing about Kyle Tucker being linked to the Mets until a week and a half ago? It was all about Bellinger. It was about Austin Hayes. It was about the possibility of Brendan Donovan trade, or maybe even Harrison Bader coming back. That's what we were hearing. It was like talking about Bellinger all the time. It was Bellinger watch basically. Now that the other teams set the market for Kyle Tucker, yeah, David Stearns probably checked in and seen if he would take a short-term deal, which is fine. And we all know David Stearns would be willing to give a 3-year deal, but that fourth year didn't come from David Stearns. So Steve Cohen has to step in to put the final touches on and to make sure Tucker doesn't get away. Because what David Stearns has proven to be doing as a New York Mets president of baseball ops since he's took over was fail many times when it came to the trade market or the free agent market, losing out on big players, even their own players. So we can't act like David Stearns is an absolute genius. Look, I'm going to give him credit. I already said this from day one. When I see David Stearns actually do the work to sign a big player or make a big trade when it comes to like a top pitcher on the market, on the free agent market or the trade market, and he does it, I'm going to give him credit. But I'm not giving you credit for Devin Williams. I'm not giving you credit for Jorge Polanco. I'm just not. Those are not moves that are going to dictate anything. That's going to make anything special. It ain't moving the needle. And once again, and here's another thing. How does anybody know Steve Cohen's in the negotiations if Steve Cohen didn't leak that? Steve Cohen is a guy who likes to be involved. And he likes people to know about that too. So I think the agent leaked all these numbers and years and contract details to the media just to, spew up a little bit more from other teams or possibly the Mets. But that Cohen in the negotiations that we heard, it just didn't come out of nowhere. It's not like the reporters were in the room. Steve Cohen did that. I mean, that's just the way it is. So we have to understand sometimes that the writing's on the wall. We see what David Stearns does and does not do. Because Pete Alonso wouldn't have been a Met last year. I don't even think Juan Soto would have been close to being a Met if David Stearns had full reign and Steve Cohen didn't get involved and seriously involved, not sitting in a room letting David Stearns do what he does. So, yeah, Steve Cohen's involved now. So I really do feel that we're going to get Kyle Tucker, because I don't think when Steve Cohen gets in a room, especially when it's not a Japanese player that is probably like in love with the Dodgers, even though the Dodgers are involved here, the Dodgers aren't going to have a better offer than the New York Mets. It's just a matter of if Tucker wants to go to the Dodgers and wants to be the 7th best player on that team, or does he want to be one of the core 3 guys on the New York Mets? I don't think he wants to go to Toronto. I think if he wanted that long-term deal that bad, he wouldn't care where it is. But because it's in Toronto and it's in Canada, I don't think he wants to go to Toronto. Unless they come back with, you know what, we're willing to give you 7 years, $280 million. And they come back tomorrow and say, you know what, we'll give you 8 years through $310. Maybe that will entice him. But because he hasn't take that long-term deal yet, and the Dodgers and Mets are very seriously involved and still a huge candidate to land him, tells me he does not want to go to Toronto. I think it's either going to be the Mets or the Dodgers. And it's always I don't think the Dodgers are going to have a better deal than the Mets. It's just a matter of, is he going to willing to take a short-term deal with the opt-outs that the Mets are going to have in those contracts? We'll talk about that in just a second. They can actually try to, woo him, so to speak, into their deal, because maybe it's, 3 years, $40 million. But again, the incentive is back-to-back world championships. You won't be the main player on the team. You would, maybe they'll have an opt-out, but at least they'll put him in a lineup that is clearly better than the New York Mets. But again, it determines what we are going to end up doing at the end of the day, right? Are the Mets going to lose another player to the Dodgers? Like that, this is the problem too, is that if you keep on losing players, the teams that you're competing against are getting better. We all forget about that part. Like, everybody doesn't want Bellinger. Oh, okay, nobody wants Bellinger. Well, what happens if he goes to a team that you have to deal with? Not saying that he will, but so now he's on another team that you have to compete against. Same thing with Kyle Tucker. If he goes to the Dodgers, it makes it that much harder for the New York Mets to deal with a team like the Dodgers. Having Kyle Tucker on your team and not the Dodgers gives you a chance. Right? I don't want to hear anybody say, oh, we lost Tucker. It's stupid to give somebody $50 million a year when he's not a great player, which he is, but I'm not going to give $50 million, but they'll be okay with Austin Hayes because he's going to move the needle, or a Brendan Donovan, or a Harrison Bader. It's not going to make a difference. So this is where I don't know why people playing music on the car right now loud as hell for no reason. And it's not even a good song. I'm sorry about that. It's just, I hear it. I'm like, what the hell are people doing here? All right. So, all right, guys, here's the other thing. And Crooklyn, it's not about crying on a show. I'm giving you my opinion. You don't like it, go home. Go away. I've said this many times. I'm giving you my opinion, my honest opinion. You don't have to agree. That's cool. Right? We're here to agree to disagree. But here's the thing. It's not about crying about it. It's about stating the facts. I'm not lying to you. You can find all this information. When Steve Cohen gets involved, it's a whole new ballgame. But this is what's going to happen. You get Tucker, Stearns will get the credit because Met fans fall for his stupid propaganda. And I think some content creators do the same thing. Even though I love a lot of them, and I know some of them, and, acquaintances, I met them many times, either at games or on live events. But sometimes they fall for that propaganda too. And a lot of them did last year with the whole prospect pitchers last year after the trade deadline. So it's going to be very interesting. And Barry, I agree. Cohen knows Stearns' weakness. And Stearns' weakness is exactly what's been the problem so far since he's taken over this team, is that he will not go the extra mile to get the deal done. He will not give that extra year or that extra money, even though he has full reign to do so, because Steve Cohen said it many times. Even David Stearns himself say he has range that he can go to. So he knows he can go more. Steve Cohen always says, if David Stearns believes that's the player you want, there's always room to add. Steve Cohen's always said that. So guess what? Stearns still doesn't do it. You keep on losing players, it's very hard to get better. And oh, by the way, for everybody who, says, oh, if we lose on a free agent, we'll just trade for somebody. Who? Since when is David Stearns trade prospects? And don't give me last year with a bunch of bum prospects for the relievers last year. Drew Gilbert full out of favor with the Mets organization. Guys on the depth chart passed him up over the last 2 seasons. And he was kind of the odd man out. That was the only guy that was worth anything. Everybody else was like, nobody's going to miss him. So until he makes the big deal, Crooklyn, yeah, it's my delusional opinions, but have I said anything wrong? No. I didn't, and that's okay. Right? I'm definitely not always right. I can assure you that, and I'll be honest with that. But it's not delusion when it's a fact. David Stearns has not done a good job. David Stearns still hasn't made that big move. And until he does, it's a problem. That's why Steve Cohen steps in. The owners don't step in unless they believe this is not going to get done or certain things are not going to get done. So this is the issue. This has been the issue with David Stearns. This is the why I don't trust David Stearns. Because there will come a time, or maybe there won't, but I didn't think Steve Cohen was, remember we talked about it this year, that it seemed like Steve Cohen was going to let David Stearns do what he wants to do, and he was going to stay out of it. Well, he's not anymore. Why is that? Because Steve Cohen knows that this has been a disaster of an offseason. He ain't stupid. You don't become a multi-billionaire by being stupid. And that is why Steve Cohen gets involved. Because, yes, I'm not saying David Stearns is a dummy. I'm not saying he doesn't know his stuff. But he has a weakness. And his weakness is not going above and beyond for certain players. I'm not saying for every player. But there's certain players you got to give that extra year to. You got to give that little bit more money to. That's how you get good players. These 3-year deal nonsense are for guys, and the minimal money are for guys who weren't good in the last couple of years or who were injured recently. That's what you get in short-term deals that are not worth a lot of money. Crooklyn, I completely understand that. But again, we just found out Steve Cohen was involved. Do you really think he wasn't involved sooner? And yes, you can give $10 million to somebody the owner has to sign off. But again, that 4th year, where do you think it came from David Stearns' bright idea? Probably not. So yeah, of course, the owner has to sign off on everything. But we know David Stearns has full reign to add if he feels like it's worth it for a player. Steve Cohen always said he's not going to deny that. He's got to get the final approval, of course. But he knows that. But Steve Cohen doesn't have to get involved at all if David Stearns is just willing to do it. The money's there. Steve Cohen always says there's always extra to be there if you think the player is worth it. And Kyle Tucker is worth it clearly because Steve Cohen is involved. And again, even if we get Kyle Tucker, we still have to get more. And we'll get into that on another show. Let's see. Tucker is not going to sign a 3-year deal. Well, he's very serious about the Mets, and the Mets had just offered a 4-year deal, the 4th year, which I think is critical, to be quite honest with you. With it probably being $50 million, which has been widely reported. It might be 48, 50. It's in that range. But let's say it is 4 years, $200 million, right? I know I put 220 there. The reason why I put 220 there, because again, when you have a short-term deal, you got to give a lot of incentives for Kyle Tucker, right? If he plays this many games, becomes an all-star, MVP, there's added money in there involved. How many home runs, all the incentives you can put to entice him to come here. So that is another thing where I think that the Mets can incentivize the contract even more, not just with opt-outs or deferrals. Because I don't think the Dodgers are going to a 4th year. There has been no indication that they've given a 4th year or even offered it. Now, they still might, which, again, that would be problematic. And that is what I think the agent for Tucker is trying to do. I don't think Kyle Tucker wants to go to Toronto. Because if he was looking for a long-term deal and he was dead set on it, he'd be a Toronto Blue Jay already. Because the only 2 teams that were involved that we know about, the Dodgers and the Mets, aren't going long-term. Now, maybe there's a team hiding in the shadows that might pop up, a team like the Giants or another team that we're not even thinking of might pop up and say, hey, we'll give you a long-term deal, and he'd rather go there. That's a strong possibility as well. So it is going to be interesting. No, Crooklyn. Yeah, I'm going to blame Stearns for sure because his job is to make this team better. Right? Steve Cohen, when he gets involved, he can do anything he wants to do. And again, I've blamed Steve Cohen before because he allowed David Stearns to make this many holes on the roster. So Steve Cohen has a lot of blame. A lot of blame because he allowed David Stearns to blow up a core without making his team better. So David Stearns Cohen allowed all this to happen. So Cohen has a lot this year. Cohen has a lot to blame, a lot of blame. But David Stearns made these moves. When Steve Cohen allowed him to do all this and, stood in the side, and now all of a sudden is jumping back into it, it's a clear sign that Steve Cohen is not happy with what's going on here. So Steve Cohen has a lot of blame. And I think I'm not mad about breaking up the core per se, but when you break up the core and you don't really fill those holes with at least competent players, at least somewhere closer to the guys you got rid of, or better, that's a problem. So yeah, it is a problem. So with the $50 million that is reported to be the case for AAV, hearing that that the Mets offered a 4th year, which again, I think is extremely, extremely critical to probably beating the Dodgers offer. Again, I think if the Dodgers offer a 4th year, I don't know what Steve Cohen can do. Maybe he can offer him more money. I don't know. Because clearly the AAV isn't the problem. It's the years. It's going to be crazy. Can this get up to $55, $60 million if need be? I don't think if Steve Cohen's involved now, I don't see him stopping until these teams back out. And I don't know if I think the Dodgers will, because again, you're back-to-back World Series champions. They don't really need Tucker, but they don't really need some of the players on their team, but they continue to get them. So again, I think the Dodgers are the biggest threat, not the Toronto Blue Jays, because again, they have that long-term deal on the table. Tucker should have taken it, right? Everybody talks about security for years, but he hasn't yet. And again, at the end of the day, he might be a Blue Jay. But right now, with the added fourth year in this offer that has been reported, I know Mike Puma reported as well that the Mets don't really have a feel of what Tucker's going to do. Like, they're not really sure, which is funny because yesterday we heard they had, it was a great meeting, and it was a good rapport and all that fun stuff. So we'll see. And San Antonio, he might sign an 8-year deal. And again, that's another reason why I think these leaks are coming out when it comes to the Mets offer, because the reason why you're not hearing about the Dodgers offer is because it's not better than the Mets offer. If it was, you'd be hearing about all the Dodger leaks. But because the Mets offer is bigger than the Dodger offer when it comes to money and probably the fourth year, now the agent says, well, we'll leak this out. So Toronto gets a little, I guess, desperate, and might add that 8th year, or that, I don't know if it's a 6th year or whatever, but add that extra year, extra money. Obviously, look, I said this for a while. If you're going to overpay for a player, you're probably going to get the player. And again, I'm never against overpaying for a player. If you want the guy and you need to get him and there's competition for him, blow it out of the water, just like they did with Juan Soto last year. You had to blow everybody out of the water to make it happen. You want Kyle Tucker. Clearly, the Mets want Kyle Tucker. I'm not saying to go long-term now, but you could lose him because, again, Steve Cohen and David Stearns couldn't go to, or didn't want to go the extra mile. Now, I think with Steve Cohen being involved now, there's a few more miles to go with Steve Cohen and with Kyle Tucker. So, and Dolo, I think it is. The Giants are a sleeper team for sure. So we'll see. Johnny, what did you say? Give me a second, guys. I'm trying to click on the comments. Give me 1 second. What's the difference between Toronto, New York, Boston weather? I don't think it's about weather. Again, Toronto, yes, is a hop, skip, and a jump from New York, but it is another country. We don't know Tucker's family situation. He might have young kids. Kids are in school. Maybe they don't want to uproot to another country and change that for his family. Like, there's a lot that goes involved, except for Kyle Tucker having personal reasons for going or not going to a team. This isn't a team that's in, the West Coast. They are in another country. Now, again, New York or Boston, the weather, it's shitty. We all know that. Right? It's the north. It's the north. Northeast, north. Right? It's cold. It's snowy. It's shitty weather. We all know that. The West Coast, LA, you got great weather. But again, I don't know if the Dodgers are going to up their offer. San Antonio, sure. Yeah. Wasn't Vientos working with Alex Bregman? Does that mean anything? Tucker has friends on the Blue Jays, a couple of Astros, right? He was working out with probably them. But again, I don't think that matters. I think a lot of these guys live in the same area, especially if you are on teams that are either, spring training in Arizona or Florida. You live near these guys. A lot of these players have homes in the spring training area where their facilities are. So I'm not taking too much into that. I still don't think that matters, to be quite honest with you. I think that the reason why these short-term deals between the Mets and the Dodgers are so impactful, and why Tucker is seriously thinking about it, is because I don't think he wants to go to Canada. And Let's see. Oh, yeah. I mean, you want to talk about Suarez? I know the Red Sox signed Suarez. That was a pretty good deal. What was it $26 million a year for 5 years, right? 5 years. What was it? 160, I think it was, whatever it was. But it was around $26 million. Oops. Another problem with David Stearns, it seems like when he has one hand in the cookie jar, he can't multitask. And that seems to be a problem as well. Like he's dead focused on one person and, the others just fly off the board. Well, now that's another starting pitcher. I'm not saying Randy Suarez is an ace. He's not, but look, he doesn't have a stuff like a top pitcher, but his numbers say he's very good. I mean, that was a potential good option for the New York Mets. He's gone now. And, you keep on waiting and waiting and waiting. These guys are going to come off the board, which means other guys are going to get more expensive, which is concerning. You don't think Valdez now is going to, licking his chops right now? Because the teams that lost out on Suarez and maybe don't want or have the capabilities of trading for his top starting pitcher, now Valdez is the guy. So, yeah, I don't know. So it is what it is, right? Obviously, Suarez could have been an option for sure. And again, when it comes to David Stearns, you really think they were going to go 5 years for Suarez? No fucking way. Again, the same issue over and over again with David Stearns. Keep on talking about this over and over again. So, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, they all live like 30 minutes to the Jays facility, extra month at home a year. Oh, yeah, sure. Okay, but again, still, that doesn't mean Tucker wants to go to Canada. But, that is the issue, is that the short-term philosophy that David Stearns has, and again, Steve Cohen is allowing this to go on. And again, giving guys long-term deals and a lot of money and a $350 million payroll hasn't got the Mets anywhere close to a championship. So I understand that. But stop thinking that we can get really good pitchers on short-term deals and continue to think that it could happen when it doesn't. Framber Valdez is a few years older. There is question about his attitude. That's probably why he's not getting a long-term deal and probably going to end up getting a short-term deal. So that's why the Mets are probably involved. But it's crazy to me. Like everybody has a philosophy. Everybody wants to run things the way they want to and don't like to budge from that. But you know what? The good GMs, the good president of the baseball operations, sometimes they have to push the envelope a little bit away from that philosophy a little bit. Not completely, but sometimes you have to for certain players. And I'm not saying you have to do that for Valdez. I think you should do it for Skubal. I think you should do it for Tucker, because those guys are the best on the market, free agency and trade market. That is where you have to really understand that this is what could possibly happen if the Mets can't fuck this up. Like, if they don't get Tucker, where are they going for outfield? They're not signing Bellinger. They tried everything in their mother to get as short of term as possible for Kyle Tucker. They're not going over or even matching the Mets, the Yankees offer for Cody Bellinger. And honestly, if you match that deal from the Yankees for Cody Bellinger, then why didn't you do it for the better player in Kyle Tucker? You see that problem? That's the stupidity in this situation. You lose Kyle Tucker. Let's say he goes to the Blue Jays. I'm not saying give him 7 or 8 years, but you lose Kyle Tucker, and now you're going to overspend for Cody Bellinger, who is the lesser player. The guy who fell off the face of the mat. And I like Cody Bellinger, but he's not Kyle Tucker. And that's the other thing that is so frustrating when it comes to these short-term deals and not really pivoting from those short-term deals and sometimes going a little bit further to get the guy you want. And it sucks. And let's see. Dola, I wanted to see your thing. You said that I'm sure the Canada tax is less than the New York and LA combined. I don't know about that. I don't know Canada's tax laws, but I think the taxes are much higher than New York and LA. I think it's like near 50%, right? I think it's like a crazy number when it comes to the tax rate in Canada. Again, we're talking about millions of dollars here. I mean, Kyle Tucker is going to cry poor, right? If he gets $40 million from the Toronto Blue Jays and he brings home $25 million or $20 million, he'll be all right. I think he can live. We're not talking about somebody who makes 70 grand a year getting, 45% taxes out of their income and, barely living. Like, come on, So, but yeah, I mean, look, New York tax is crazy. LA tax is, California tax is crazy. Canada's tax. Look, anywhere he goes, he's going to get taxed up the ass. So it is what it is. Bo Bichette, well, well, see, the Phillies are dangerous when it comes because they lost a couple of players. They lost one of their pitchers. I think they're lingering too. I mean, if they get Bo Bichette, I mean, again, I worry about the teams in the NL East. I can't worry about the teams in the NL West, the NL Central, even though it's important to worry about them. But focus on our division. And I think the Phillies are still the team to be in the NL East. The Braves quietly have gotten better while they're getting healthier, which is always a dangerous game because they can just be juggernauts. And the Mets, honestly, they're probably right there with the Marlins right now because, again, they don't have Tucker yet. I don't like their rotation. Their rotation is exactly the same from last year, minus Nolan McLean for a few starts. So, it is worrisome. And it is concerning. And just like last year, the Mets can't repeat the offseason they had this year. And what do I mean by that? You re-sign Pete Alonso, you sign Juan Soto, your lineup looks like a juggernaut on paper. But when you half-ass a rotation, you end up with the results you had in 2025, where the pitching sucked. I'm sorry. I don't care about the first 2 months of the season. There's 6 months in a season. When you suck for the other 4, that's a problem. And it's not just the starting pitching being bad that was ultimately the downfall. It was the trickle-down effect of destroying your bullpen and overusing them in the first half, which made David Stearns go out and get 3 relievers on the market at the trade deadline when if you did anything with the starting rotation that could have helped this team in the offseason with like a better quality starter and fill up that rotation a little bit better, maybe your bullpen wouldn't have been tired out before the first half ended. And you could have looked, instead of getting 3 relievers, you might have needed 1 reliever. And you could have got a starter as well. Instead of trading 12 prospect or 12 minor leaguers for 3 relievers, maybe you could have traded 12 or 7 minor leaguers for a bullpen arm and a starter. Like, this all becomes a trickle-down effect. I don't want to hear people say if the Mets don't get any starting pitching that's worth talking about, but they land Kyle Tucker, and everybody's going to talk about the deadline like David Stearns has actually made a big move at the deadline to bring a legitimate starting pitcher in here, because he doesn't. Like, he's failed too many times for me to think that can happen during the trade deadline. So getting Kyle Tucker would be awesome. It's needed, actually. But if you don't get a top starting pitcher in here, along with Nolan McLean, you're repeating the same process you did last year. Because Marcus Semien and Jorge Polanco aren't making a difference, especially with a lineup I think will be okay. I think you can win. I don't think it'd be great, but I think you can win. But the Mets last year had to score over 6 runs per game just to have a chance of winning last year. Who think that's going to change this year with basically the same rotation? I don't know, man. I don't know. So, Hopefully, this signing happens, I would hope, over the next 48 hours, 72 hours. That would be great. That would be fun. Obviously, it wouldn't be fun if he goes elsewhere. It would be pissed off. I know I'd be pissed off because, again, the Mets dropped the ball yet again. And yes, I'm putting everybody in that ball. And that goes for Steve Cohen, David Stearns in general. You can't let this guy get away. Figure it out. More money, another year, doesn't matter. You want to give him 3 opt-outs in a 5-year deal? So be it. Do it. Get it done. If you don't get it done, we're going to continue to question, why do you keep on losing out on talent? Because this has been the problem. David Stearns made the decision to break up the core that left this roster with many more holes to fill. That is very hard to do when you do that. But he made his own bed. So, number one, he has to lay in it. Number two, he has to fix it. And some might say he's probably not going to fix it this year. Well, all he does is talk about the prospects. Then why are you in on Kyle Tucker when you got a top prospect center fielder? When you got a top prospect outfielder in Ryan Clifford? Why are you going to get Kyle Tucker? Because even if you do have opt-outs, and let's say that his market isn't what it's going to be, he has a good year, but it's not good enough to like opt out and knowing he's not going to get no $50 million a year, and Tucker stays around. Well, that's one less hole to fill from your prospect. Once again, where David Stearns needs to make decisions on a lot of these guys in the farm system. You can't have 20 infielders on this roster. It doesn't make sense. There are too many infielders. That's another reason why it makes sense to make a trade for a starting pitcher, a top starter, because these guys can't play. Right now, it's Vientos on this roster. It's Beatty on this roster. Pretty good chance of Acuna or Mauricio on this roster. These guys, how many more are going to be bench players? You have top prospects that are sitting their asses on the bench. They're not getting better. They're not developing, and they're losing value by the day. David Stearns needs to make a decision on these guys because Kyle Tucker would be nice, but there's still a hell of a lot of work to do to make this team even a legitimate chance of being a contender in 2026. That is what has to be done, and we all know it. We're all talking about it, and I do appreciate everybody tuning into the Kyle Tucker Watch Party show right here on the channel and on X. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. If you are on X and you're watching this right now, head over to the channel real quick. The link is in the bio, or the link is on the video right now. Click on it. Subscribe to the channel, guys. We're going to do this watch party every single day. Some days 7 o'clock, 9 o'clock. Today is 9 o'clock because I was going to do it at 7 o'clock. Had some stuff to do, so I just set it to 9 o'clock. Tomorrow, there'll be another one, 6, 7 o'clock, whatever. But until Tucker signs, we're going to continue to do it. And hopefully it's soon, because I don't want to be on day 7 on a Kyle Tucker watch, because it gets kind of repetitive and it gets annoying at that point, because it's like, all right, what are we doing here? Because the Mets also can't linger and be focused just on this guy, and other guys are coming off the board, right? Suarez just came off the board. That came out of nowhere. You know, you also can't be losing out on starting pitchers because you're so focused on one guy, right? I don't need Lucas Giolito to be the big pitching addition for the New York Mets. Like, that's not going to be good enough. Rock Squad, maybe he will, buddy. Ryan's like, Tucker watch day number 32. Listen, I'm not going past 7. I'll tell you that right now. I'll just wait and do a breaking news stream when he signs with whatever team. Well, you know what? That's a good point. Lord, I think it was, right? Yep. Thank you. That was a good point, because I did hear that today when I was listening to Sports Talk Radio. That's a great point right there. The Dodgers and Jays won't sign Tucker. Already gave up their 2nd, 4th, and 5th round picks. Yeah, and Tucker would be more. Absolutely. That is a good point. 100% a good point. But the Blue Jays are a team that were inches away of winning the World Series. So I don't think necessarily. See, here's the thing. I don't know how serious they are about these draft picks. I mean, we know they're important, but when the Dodgers are back-to-back World Series champions, I don't know if they're really worried about draft picks because they're still going to find a way of getting what they want. And the same thing goes for the Blue Jays. Signing Dylan Cease, I know they gave up a lot of picks, but again, I mean, it's a good point because it is a strong possibility why they might not up the offer more, right? The Jays might not want to go further because they do have to give up more draft picks. The Dodgers might not want to go past 3 years because they're saying, hey, we got to give up more draft picks. Even though I think the Dodgers are still a team to be very to be scared of the Dodgers when it comes to them being involved because you just never know. Because at any moment they can just come and say, you know what, we'll give you this and done. Deal done. So that's just the way it goes, unfortunately. But that is a great point by you when it comes to the draft picks. And that could have the Mets having the edge because it might get them a little bit more incentive to go a little bit more higher in money and maybe even another year. You never know. You never know. Jeffrey, thank you for the super chat. Let's see what you got here. If Jays lose all those picks, it doesn't matter if they sign long term. They won't have room for those players. Well, it's a good point, right? That is the point I always try to make when it comes to prospects, right? Where the Mets have an abundance of infield prospects, but they don't have a lot of room for them on their major league roster. Long-term deals are in place with certain guys. Some guys don't play that position. And even when they play a position that might be available, there's already one prospect that's already taken that spot. And the other three are either on the bench or in the minor leagues, which doesn't, yes, they can help the team. But ultimately, is it going to be good? Are they going to be worth it on the bench? Because all these top prospects play every day. When you sit them down for, they play twice a week, maybe getting a bat in the seventh inning a couple of times a week, that doesn't make them better. That might not even make them productive enough to help your team win. So that's another good point. Same thing goes for the Mets, even when you're talking about the Jays. And I do appreciate the super chat, buddy. And Music Man, I agree. I don't think the Dodgers are going to overpay. I think the Dodgers are what the Yankees were in the late 90s into the early 2000s, where they used their brand to get a player. Like they would give you a fair offer, a solid offer, but the brand is what's going to put that over the top. I think that's what the Dodgers are doing at that point. Because again, if they don't get Kyle Tucker, they're going to be just fine. The Mets don't get Kyle Tucker, it's a fucking disaster. EB, Tucker is not worth that kind of money. And the Dodgers, maybe they probably won't. But when it comes to overpaying players or worth that type of money, you know what? Is Suarez worth $26 million? Ranger Suarez? Probably not. Juan Soto, and again, we're only looking at the baseball side of this, but we also got to look at the other side. Suarez, I guess, is the top pitcher, but, when it comes to a Juan Soto deal, like $60-70 million, crazy money, you look at the jersey sales. You look at all the revenue he brings in just by his name, other things like that. Yeah, we all know Kyle Tucker's probably not worth $50 million. But you know what? The Mets put themselves in a position to they put themselves in this position to put them in another situation that they're very desperate for something like this. This is why they're offering that much money. And again, it's not about the per year. It's not. Like, Steve Cohen has $50 million in his shoes. The years are the problem. I understand the long-term ramifications, because if you give Kyle Tucker 8 years, there's a pretty good chance year 7 and 8 are very bad while you're paying all that money. But you pay these guys, especially in a long-term deal, you pay these guys within the first, let's say it's a 10-year deal, at least 6 of those years, you want to get the best out of that player. Hopefully a lot of winning and hopefully a championship or 2. That's what you hope. Now, obviously, that doesn't always happen. And I'm not saying Tucker deserves $50 million, but you know what? The Mets put themselves in this position. So it's on the Mets for allowing them to do this because they put themselves in this position. That's the problem. All right, let's see. Let's check what's going on in the Twitter sphere. Let's just look at any new information. Again, guys, if you see anything on X, you can always post it. All right, so SNY just posted about an hour ago. This is per New York Post. The Mets do not expect to know Kyle Tucker's free agency decision until at least tomorrow. Thank God I'm off. So then hopefully tomorrow it would be nice. So it seemed like the Mets think there's going to be a decision tomorrow, which again, it kind of makes sense at this point. At some point, these teams are not going to go further. And the offers are what they are. Everybody believes the Dodgers are a 3-year deal for whatever amount of money. I'm probably assuming around $40 million or so. I don't think it's more than the Mets because you would have probably heard more about the Dodgers offer than the Mets offer. The Blue Jays are the long-term deal in the wings. And the Mets are where they are right now. Ryan, you want to do an all-day watch party? How about this, guys? I'm gonna X you guys because I'm off tomorrow. Thank God. It's been a rough week of work. But let's see. What time you want to do this watch party? 9 o'clock? 10 o'clock? What do you think? Maybe 11? Started off with a little bit of 24 hours. I'd love to do that, but oof, man. I mean, I remember doing a show a couple of years ago. I don't know. I think it was the trade deadline a couple of years ago. Lunchtime. That's a good time to do. All right, Dolo, you the man. Dolo, you the man. One of the long-term subscribers of the channel. Lunchtime, 12 o'clock tomorrow. We're gonna start the watch party. So Kyle Tucker, if you're watching, I know you're not, but if you're watching, don't sign until after 12 o'clock. So yes, 12 o'clock it is, guys. 12 o'clock tomorrow, watch party. We'll get that settled out. Hopefully Tucker doesn't sign by then because I'd like to do some errands in the morning to get stuff done on my day off, the one day off that I have. Get the errands done, get back home, do some watch party, and we'll be good to go. Incentivizing plate discipline. Well, that would be nice, right? But you know what? We can talk about it, but it's up to the players to actually do that on the field, right? Yeah, explosive. That's another thing, right? Let me just throw that comment up there. Pivot to Luis Robert Jr. for the 500th time in the last two years, right? Again, it is a downgrade. It is put it this way. I'd rather give Tucker $50 million a year than to risk trading for Luis Robert Jr., which might involve Vientos, which, again, I don't care about. I'm not worried about what you give up. I really don't. There's too many guys that need to be gone from this team anyway. But it is a big risk getting Luis Robert after you lose out on Kyle Tucker. I think you should have traded for Robert Jr. last trade deadline, but it is what it is. Yeah, they might pivot to that because I don't think they're going to get Cody Bellinger if Tucker's elsewhere. So, yeah, Luis Robert Jr. might be the next thing everybody's talking about again. But here's the thing. You don't think the White Sox know the Mets are desperate at that point? You know, that Mark Vientos and an A.J. Ewan or Mark Vientos and a lower level prospect, it might be more now. Oh, no, we don't want Vientos anymore. Give me Mauricio. You know? So now you're going to have the Mets over a barrel because they lost out on Tucker. Most people know they're not going to go the distance for Bellinger, what the Yankees offered. So they're between a rock and a hard place at that point. And it's like overpaying for Robert Jr. And again, I'm not too worried about what you give up. I'm really not. Right? I care about the player you get. but it's a huge risk. There's more of a chance of Tucker being the player he is than Luis Robert Jr. being the player he was. That's a big risk. Because if he's not, we're going to have another Jose Siri on our hands, and now we have Tyrone Taylor playing center field again. And then you also have to worry about Carson Benz, who nobody knows what he's going to be. So you're going to have Tyrone Taylor. We know the bat's not good. Great defensive player. Love the player, right? He gives 110% every time. I don't have no gripe with Tyrone Taylor, but he's not a starting center fielder on a winning team. I mean, you could say the Mets are not a winning team right now, which I can agree with and understand. But you have Tyrone Taylor in center field, Carson Benz in left field. That is a lot of question marks. And we're back to where we started again. So, damn, that's where we are right now. All right, guys. So let's go through the details one more time before we call the stream a day. So the Mets offered, as we know, that's when it all started to go crazy. It looks like it's going to be $50 million a year. That's nice. It's been reported today that the Mets have offered a fourth year to their offer. I put $220 million because that's not reported. I just want everybody to know that. I put 220 because I think the Mets are going to try to incentivize. I think that's the reason why they added a fourth year. And they're going to offer not just opt-outs, but incentives, like making the All-Star team, winning the MVP, hitting this many home runs or RBIs, playing this many games. I think it's going to lead up to about a $30 million, even more on top of that. Because it doesn't just incentivize him signing the contract. You want to incentivize him to not opt out as well. But I think the only way you can get Tucker to sign is to have an opt-out or two in the contract. So incentivizing that contract where you can make $60 million in 1 year, it might entice him not to opt out, which is the other thing. Because again, if we have this problem, if he opts out after this year, we're having the same conversation again. That's why short-term deals with opt-outs are annoying, because you constantly have too much change, too much rollover, too much turnover when it comes to players and trying to fill holes again, because you're doing it every year. Red Horse, that's not true. David Stearns fucked up, right? He allowed an opening he pissed off Diaz in negotiations when Stearns says, hey, we have room to add to this contract. And you allow him to leave the room and talk to another team when you know the Dodgers were going to be aggressive with a top closer. You allowed that to happen. David Stearns fucked up that negotiations, right? He completely screwed that up. You shouldn't have left him. You could have offered him 3 years, $75 million, and it probably would have been a done deal. Now, if he would have went to the Dodgers and says, hey, the Mets gave me $375 and then they went 80-85, what are you going to do? But that never happened because he left too much room for error and too much room and allowed Diaz, already being pissed off, to go to the Dodgers and didn't want to come back. So there you go. There's your issue. Well, I mean, listen, he's not a Boris client, but guess what? His agent's doing a hell of a good job picking up the price. So whoever that agent is, you might get a few more players on his payroll very soon. So with that said, guys, the Mets offered $50 million. They reportedly offered a 4-year deal. There's possibly 1 or 2 opt-outs. And SNY just reported about an hour ago that the Mets believe that Kyle Tucker is not going to make a decision today, but it could be tomorrow. At least can be tomorrow. That's what they're thinking. This has come from SNY and the New York Post, and SNY reposted it. So we'll see. Again, tomorrow, watch party, Kyle Tucker watch party 2.0 at 12 o'clock in the afternoon. We'll do this all day if we have to. Right? We'll stay on. If it maybe 4 or 5 hours, we'll see. Hopefully it happens while we're live. That would be awesome. Right? We can either be very excited or very pissed off. and we'll talk about it, regardless of what it is. So thank you for tuning in to the first Kyle Tucker Watch Party on the channel, special edition of Mets Talk Live. Over 800 were in the stream today between YouTube and X. I do appreciate it, guys. So make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification button. If you are on X, head over to the channel real quick, subscribe to the channel. We will be talking more Kyle Tucker tomorrow, midday on a Thursday, guys. Have a good night, guys. Let's go Mets, and I'll see you tomorrow, guys. Good night.
On the mic, spitting truth from the heights. Queens unite under stadium lights. Bright nights, 7 train rides. Dreams born in the real hum. Brooklyn to Queens, yeah, we all about that outcome. This our time, this our cheer. Mets Talk Live, bring the hype, make it clear. From the boroughs to the field, this our year. Queens in the house, let the world hear. From Flushing Meadows, echoes bounce off the bat. Rob calls, hit the mic, snaps like a thunderclap. Home runs over bridges, no gaps in the story. Mets rise, reclaiming the glory. 7 the city, blue and orange army swarm. Summer vibe electric, love in every form. From Biggie's blocks to Flushing's heartbeat. Our anthem loud, no retreat.